Col- Colonel Wilkerson, is the United States at war with Russia?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I don't care what.
How can we be a mediator? How can Trump send the real estate agents, and how can Putin greet them with any level of seriousness?
They don't. They won't. They can't. I mean, they can pretend, but there's no diplomacy going on, and there's going to be no diplomacy going on.
Well,
it's almost as bad as Iran. You know, he keeps saying that he's talking to the Iranians. He's not talking to the Iranians. He's not even talking to intermediaries who are talking to Iranians. He's not even talking to third parties who are talking to intermediaries who are talking to Iran. He's not talking to Iran at all. No one in the U.S. government is talking to Iran. Not Marco Rubio, not Pete Hegseth, not Donald Trump. No one is talking to Iran.
Are they talking, are people in the government, U.S. government, talking to the Pakistanis who are talking to the Iranians?
You've seen the polls on Pakistan. 90+% of the Pakistani people think we're the worst thing in the world. I wouldn't, if I were Donald Trump, I'm not sure I would do anything through Islamabad anymore with that kind of polling and that kind of interest in Islamabad in helping the Chinese. And they have moved heaven and earth now to help the Chinese finish their project at the port, finish other things that they're doing in Pakistan. I don't think I would want the good offices of the Pakistanis. I mean, that's sad to say. I've worked in Pakistan for years, but I think that's a reality now. And what we're seeing with MBS and MBS's sudden agreement, you know, this is all about MBS trying to save the United States. He's trying to give them a piece of terrain upon which they can perch in reasonable safety and do something like nuclear program. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to save us. I don't think it's going to work. And now Trump, in obeisance to Bibi Netanyahu, maybe probably more Miriam Adelson and others like her, is saying that the Saudi Arabians have to accept the Abraham Accords and all this stuff in order for this to go ahead. And they've already said no deal until you show me a viable option for a viable Palestinian state sometime in the not too distant future. So MBS, you are hoist now upon your own petard.
The June bombing of Iran failed. The March-April bombing of Iran failed. What makes Trump, Rubio, Hegseth, General Kane, etc., think that this current round of bombing is going to produce some result at the diplomatic table?
Sort of the same kind of political phenomena that made LBJ, Robert McNamara, Walt Rostow, and a host of others, George Ball around LBJ, 65 and 66, think that if they bomb the bejesus, drop more iron bombs on North Vietnam than we dropped on Germany in World War II, if they keep this up, the Vietnamese will surrender. Now, nobody in that entourage of people, plus others, really believed that it was going to work. What was happening was LBJ knew that if he were perceived as the president who cut and run from Vietnam, he would have no possibility whatsoever of getting his Great Society approved by the Senate and the Congress of the United States. That's what happened. So he sent 500,000 more troops. He sent 50,000 roughly Americans to their death and others, and all because of domestic politics. Well, a lot of this that's going on right now is domestic politics. Trump does not know how to extricate himself from this war of choice that he alone, not Joe Biden, not any previous president, not any future president, Trump alone started. He has no idea how to extricate himself, nor does General Kane, nor does Pete Hegseth. They have no idea. And domestic politics, what are the polls now? 29% of Americans approve of the war, and the rest don't.
69,
this is disastrous.
69% opposing. I don't know if LBJ had numbers that bad, Colonel.
Well, I heard you say on one show, I was laughing at it. You said, I don't know any of that 29%.
Right, I don't. I really don't. I want to play for you. It's a little long, but it's very telling. Very telling. As a former military person, you'll appreciate seeing the Secretary of Defense squirm. Senator John Ossoff grilling Pete Hegseth. Chris, cut number 9. It's coming.
Yeah.
On day 14 of this conflict, Mr. Secretary, day 14, nearly 5 months ago, you stated that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and, quote, made combat ineffective. That was on day 14 of the war. Was that an accurate statement?
They didn't have a Navy any longer. It was completely sunk. Their missiles were buried underneath a lot of their underground facilities, and their defense industrial base has been almost completely destroyed.
On day 14 of this conflict, in the second week of the conflict, you stated that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and, quote, made combat ineffective. Was that an accurate statement? Yes or no?
Iran's ability to challenge the United States of America at the level at which we're capable of.
That's not what I asked you, Mr. Secretary. You said on day 14, Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and, quote, made combat ineffective. Yes or no? Was that an accurate statement?
What the American military has done to the Iranian military is a historic military defeat,
answer the
and
question
they're ineffective
under oath?
in that context.
3 weeks after you'd already said Iran's military was destroyed and combat ineffective, you said, quote, Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory. You said Iran's military had been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come. And you stated we had, quote, achieved every single objective. Were those accurate statements?
It certainly was, on behalf of the men and women in uniform, a historic military victory over Iran.
Mr. Secretary, you stated
missiles,
4
but it's
months
not a
ago
combat-effective
that Iran's
military.
military had been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come. Has Iran's military been, for the last 4 months, combat ineffective?
It's been set back not just years, but likely decades.
Mr. Secretary, you stated we had, quote, achieved every single objective. Was that an accurate statement 4 months ago?
The main objective of this was to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon.
Early in the conflict
Iran will
on
never
day
have a
3,
nuclear
Mr.
weapon.
Secretary, early in the conflict, day 3, you said one of those core objectives was to, quote, destroy the missile threat. And as you restated on day 5, to, quote, obliterate Iran's missiles and drones. Those were clearly and repeatedly stated core objectives of the campaign, which 4 months ago you declared had been completed victoriously with every single objective achieved. Were those objectives achieved 4 months ago?
No one ever stated that every single missile was gone.
You stated on March 8th, day 9 of the war, on 60 Minutes, you assured the American people of Iranian surrender. Does that remain your prediction?
Ultimately, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon to threaten the United States of America. That has been the objective, and it remains so.
So just to review, you will not answer whether your statement made on the 14th day of the war that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and made combat ineffective was a truthful statement to the American people as you sit here and ask for tens of billions more for the conflict.
Senator's time has
Had a
expired.
historic and effective military campaign against the largest state sponsor of terrorism.
Won't answer the question.
Senator,
Sounds like Pistol Pete has drunk the Kool-Aid, Colonel.
It's awesome. It really is awesome. And I have to attribute the same kind of comment to General Kane because I can't believe that he's still in his position with a man above him, directly above him, like that, saying the things he's saying. He's crawling in front of Ossoff. And I got to say something too, Judge. I spent a lot of time in Georgia, so I have an affection for Georgia in some ways. I think that's the man that I see on the other side of the political aisle, if you will, who shows presidential prospects and shows the kind of conscience, the kind of reasoning, the kind of Americanism that I would associate with a viable candidate to take Donald Trump's place. And he is more and more serious every day, and I'm following him for that reason pretty closely now. Now, I'm I'm easy to get fooled too, but I've been looking for anyone that I could throw up in front of my face at my age and say, there is hope. There is a person on the horizon who might even make a fairly decent president of these United States. The more I hear him, the more I see him, the more I evaluate him, the more I think he might be the person. All to say there's a political advertisement for you, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't mean it.
Should Iran negotiate with the United States, or
They won't.
is the United States of no credibility whatsoever?
I think they have merged. There's no such thing as hardliners and middle of the roaders and soft on this or soft on that in Iran anymore. There's 92, 93 million people spread across the expanse of land as variegated and as large as Western Europe, with some terrain that's even far more formidable than that terrain, and that includes the French Alps. And they are solid and resolute, unlike everything the pundits in this country preached and prophesied with regard to Iran, in uniform and out. They are standing up to the empire, and frankly, they are beating us. And that's Donald Trump's problem. He's beginning to realize there aren't many ways, if any, to extricate himself from this war he started.
He doesn't have much time left, Colonel. Gasoline is already $5 a gallon in New Jersey. It went up $1 a gallon in the 2 weeks that I was away.
Wait till you see what happens if China actually makes a decision, and they're pondering it right now, to refill the largest strategic petroleum reserve in the world, which is fairly low right now. If they do that, they will reverse the OPEC effect, if you will. OPEC could, withhold oil from the market, adjust the prices, and so forth. Think the Arab embargo in 1973. Well, China now is the world's largest consumer. And if it goes for a rapid fill-up of its SPR now, that is so going to distort the markets that I have people telling me who are experts in these markets that Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate, the two primary benchmarks, could go well above $150.
Well, what does that do to the average consumer?
We're talking about $10 plus at the pump and even more for diesel.
Oh, my goodness. And of course, as diesel goes up, the price of food and everything transported by trucks goes up.
Absolutely. And we can't refine the kind of oil we have at this moment anyway, in any timely way, to fill the gap. So Donald Trump is very starkly looking at having caused at least global recession and maybe even global depression, particularly if we carry this on the way Hegseth was suggesting, and the Houthis are allowed to not just add their weight to the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, but to block the Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea. Because we're talking about an enormously more important conduit for world commodities in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal than we are in the Strait of Hormuz. And we've done the analysis. We did it at the U.S. Institute of Peace when it was still the USIP. We had a tabletop game and we evaluated the cost of going around the Horn, which is essentially what you have to do. Or if you're the Saudis and you come out of Yanbu and you have to go up through the Suez and do the full route, it's 40 more days at sea. But the cost of going around the Gulf or around the Horn of Africa is much more expensive than, say, avoiding the Straits of Malacca and going into the South China Sea, the other critical point in the world for that kind of traffic. So you're talking about devastating effect on the global economy. And Judge, let me tell you something. One of the reasons the Chinese are building these railroads is to alleviate that problem for themselves. We're looking at a struggle an age-old struggle between maritime powers, Britain and America being the two prominent ones that are disappearing from the scene, if you will, and the land powers of Russia, China, and now Iran. Because these railroads will pull the commerce off the maritime routes and put them on land where it's cheaper and safer.
Wow. Colonel, why did Trump start this war?
Well, if I want to attribute some strategy to it, it's what I just said. We're trying to stop China from doing this. But I don't think for a moment that he's got that kind of genius and that kind of grasp. I think he's a grifter and a grifter par excellence, and that's what he's in office for, is to make money. But there are people behind him who understand this, and I don't discount J.D. Vance in that regard, and Peter Thiel behind J.D. Vance, and others that are behind Trump, monetarily speaking, Elon Musk, for example. They grasp some of this. And I'm sure that they are behind both the effort to dismantle Russia, if you will, and to go after China through that dismantling. And what we're doing is forcing the world to merge into a bloc that opposes us. And if you've seen the reports lately on that bloc, it's about 60 to 62% of the world. It's about the same degree of the world's GDP. And in poll after poll, they say their populace is like in Pakistan and even in South Korea. They say they think the number one threat to their future is the United States of America.
Do you think Trump is politically oblivious or indifferent or ignorant of the consequences of all this on voters in 4 months?
I'm not sure he's capable of evaluating it anymore, Judge. That's what frightens me most, because what does that mean? If Trump really is going behind the pillar at the White House to, relieve himself or whatever, if he really is getting demented, and if he really is deeper into that dementia than we've noticed before, who's making the decisions? And I have to conclude it's Steve Miller and Laura Loomer and Vaught and Besson, Hegseth, and a host of other people I don't think have the interest of this empire, this country, certainly not this republic, at heart at all. I think all they have at heart is their special cultish interest at best. At worst, their enrichment.